What's going on, everyone? I know a lot of you have been waiting for the hot green list that I promised you, and today I am here to bring it to you. This has been pretty fun and one of the most powerful, aggressively oriented lists in the entire game at this point. This is kind of like the new Sabine Green, if you will. But before we dive into the list and some things that are really sweet and actually play with the deck, I just want to mention I have a TCG play link in the description down below. Be sure to check it out if you want to pick up any of the cards for set 2 or for set 1. Let's talk about Han, guys. There's a little bit of a bug going on with SW right now, so unfortunately Han is sideways. But his action is to exhaust Han, and you may play a unit from your hand. That's really important because it does not work with Smuggle. I've had some people ask me about that. And it costs 1 less, but you have to deal 2 damage to it when it enters. Small note here, a couple people have been asking about Stolen Landspeeder. Unfortunately, you just end up killing Stolen Landspeeder before it moves over to your opponent, so that doesn't really work. But the flip side is a 5 to deploy 3/6 leader that has the same action, but you do not need to exhaust Han, and you can only do it once per turn. So the idea behind this list is, well, we could just play higher value units alongside potentially cheap units to either flood the board or just get in some massive heavy hitters before they normally would show up. I think a lot of people are focused on, oh, I could play a bunch of 1 drops and 2 drops and 3 drops like really quickly. Well, that is true, and we are doing that. But actually, the real strength of this list is to be able to play 5 drops, 6 drops a turn early, because those things are kind of insurmountable. Things like Podameron, things like Wrecker, things like Gorilla Attack Pod. These types of cards are really incredible when you get down a turn early. So what's kind of the same compared to Sabine Green, and what is different? Well, we kind of have a little bit of a Rebel package here. We don't quite have as many Rebel units as we did in set 1, because a lot of the new units are not in fact Rebels, except for a couple of them. However, we're still running with, R2-D2, Battlefield Marines, A-Wings, Akbars, Red 3s. We have a copy of Fleet Lieutenant. We still have our K2SOs. As I mentioned, the Gorilla Attack Pod. All these things are pretty standard stuff. The idea behind this is, well, all of these units, for most of them, you could actually play for 1 cheaper. So you could do something like Battlefield Marine plus R2 on turn 1, or A-Wing plus R2. Or you can go like turn 1, I just play my A-Wing, but turn 2, you can potentially play, a 2-drop and potentially another 2-drop if you want. But the idea is usually the 3 drops on turn 1 are exceptionally valuable. Things like the Sundari Peacekeeper. This is essentially a 3/3 restore 2 on turn 1. You can also roll up with, well, as I mentioned, some of the more expensive cards that are running in the deck, the Adelphi Patrol Wing, Marauder coming down on turn 4 alongside Podameron. These cards are very difficult to deal with, right? If you look at Marauder, it'll come in as a 4/3. So, okay, can that still ambush things? Of course, right? On turn 4, or turn 3 rather, you could kill all your 3 drops that your opponent's played, like Red 3s, or if they've played, an A-Wing or Wing Leaders, you just kind of knock that out. There's also, as I mentioned, the Adelphi Patrol Wing, which comes out as a 4/4 space unit, but allows you to attack and get a bunch of damage in, which is really nice. And then we start going up a little bit higher on the curve, and on turn 4, with 5 resources, you can do, flip Han, but alongside that, you can get a Gorilla Attack Pod down, which can come down as a 6/4 immediately readied. Or Wrecker, which comes down as a 7/4 overwhelm, but kills something when it comes down. So really insane stuff there. And then, of course, we have some of the earlier drops that, well, I haven't quite mentioned yet, that synergize specifically with Han, such as Heroic Renegade, which comes down as a 1 resource 4/1, which is extremely aggressive. We also have a few things that kind of work with going into the middle to late game, when you're getting all your cards deployed, and then you're in that stage where Han's may be dead and you have not quite that many units left over, but you just need to squeeze in that last bit of damage. We have a couple of Smuggle cards in Cassian and Night Owl Skirmisher. Cassian in particular is excellent. And we have a little bit of tricks and burn going into our opponent's face. We have 3 copies of For a Cause. The vast majority of our cards here are heroism cards. The exception for that is, well, the Desperate Attack, which is essentially a surprise strike for this deck, but 1 resource, as you can attack with a damaged unit and it gains +2/+0. This essentially just acts as 2 additional damage. And we also have Heroic Resolve. This is a particularly good on, something that just has a lot of power. So even if you play this on like a Heroic Renegade and you place it on there, it's a 4/1 already, and then you use the action on Heroic Resolve, it becomes an 8/1 Overwhelm, which can just actually deal your opponent 5 damage and kill their unit, which can be pretty sweet. Or you can just leave this on like a Han, make him a 4/7. Who knew 4/7s are good? Oh wait, we did, because of Boba. So it's pretty sweet. I've gone through many iterations of this list. I think you could build it a few different ways. I think you can go even more low to the ground, or you can kind of leverage, that middle part of the game. But I just want to showcase this list here and showcase the power of Han in some of these situations. So let's not waste any more time and dive into some games today. All right, so we're going to dive into our first game here. A few things about the deck before we dive into our first game. Desperate Attack actually does not function on Carabas right now. I usually like to run a bunch of games before I start recording, and well, it actually wasn't working properly, so we replaced it with Heroic Sacrifice, but I do prefer that other card, definitely. And the other thing is, well, we can talk about some of the main ideas about this. I figured I'd start doing this in my videos just because, well, it's pretty important for you to successfully win with Han Solo. You really, really need to use the ECL properly in this deck. Targets like K2, Poe Dameron, Wrecker, those are the 3 kind of key targets. There are very few other scenarios where you should want an ECL before that. We kept this hand, and normally this looks a little bit strange, like double K2SO, only 3-drop hand. But remember, we can play Sundari Peacekeeper on turn 1 with Han Solo, so that's exactly what we're going to do. And against, well, in this case, Boba Yellow, this is a pretty nice start, as we have a good chance to maybe potentially killing out their unit straight up. And what's cool about this is we kept the Heroic Sacrifice in hand for a K2SO, but remember, we can go turn 2 K2SO into attack with K2SO, potentially kill a unit, get the trigger, and then ECL out a second K2SO. So we can go K2SO into K2SO, which is guaranteed 6 damage to their base, which is kind of insane. So this is actually a really, really good hand with Han specifically. A lot of other lists, that would have been an instant mulligan. Like if this was to be green, instant mulligan, because we don't have a 2-drop, right? Okay, they went with a Cartel Turncoat on turn 1. A second Cartel Turncoat on turn 1. Pretty nice hand for them. And here we have another Sundari Peacekeeper. In this spot, I think I resource the Sundari Peacekeeper. It may look a little bit awkward, but I think I do want to keep the double K2SO's Heroic Sacrifice in hand, and I do want to get a K2SO down this turn. They went all space, but we can absolutely race them if they go all space. Like the Sundari Peacekeeper here, well, fortunately for us, that is just gonna kind of blank one of these guys, essentially, and we still get in for 3. So even though they went double 1-drop 2/3 in space, which is pretty sweet, I think we can go ahead and outrace them, especially with the K2SO on turn 2, which is going to be pretty nice. So we'll see what they decide to do. Of course, if they play a unit, then we can potentially kill it. If they want to get, their leader exhaust, get the +1/+0, then they kind of have to play before they attack. And if they do that, then we can potentially just pass and see what they end up doing. Because obviously, if they don't attack, then we are pretty advantaged. They're going to play a L3. Okay. Really not all that great, to be honest. Not exactly super scared of that card. It's a 2/2 shielded. It's not terrible, but it's okay. It's a crafty smuggler. In this spot, I think I will attack with my Sundari Peacekeeper. And this sets up for Heroic Sacrifice K2 next turn. We could also get down to Poe Dameron. We could, potentially just get down another K2SO. There's a lot of different options here, but I think the one that's most exciting to me is Heroic Sacrifice K2SO. Ooh, and we can resource a Cassian for a nice little smuggle action. But we can Heroic Sacrifice a K2SO, which hits for, what is that, 9 damage. And then, well, we can actually kill their L3. Looks like they didn't give a shield token. They should have had a shield token on this. So that is a little bit awkward. I don't really want to kill this because of that. Like, I think that's not exactly kind of on theme, but I mean, it's kind of unfortunate. They already had, like, no shield token. So I'm going to go with the original plan. If this had a shield token, I'll play it as if it did. And that means I'm going to go Heroic Sacrifice, hit your base for 6, make deal 3 damage, and that's going to be a lot of damage to my opponent. And that's going to be pretty nice for us. And then we get to go, looks like they're going to play Echo Base Defender. Totally fine. We get to go attack your Echo Base Defender, hit him for 3. They're going to hit my base for 2. We get to go play a K2. And we drew a 4 cause, which is kind of what we're looking for anyways. That's a pretty nice draw. We get to go ahead and claim initiative. And then they've dealt some damage to us. Not really that scary. We can ECL out a Poe Dameron next turn. We can also smuggle out a Cassian. We got a couple of different options. Ooh, and a Adelphi Patrol Wing. Interesting. That one, I'm a little bit more excited about ECLing out that guy, because we get to kill one of their cartel turncoats, draw a card, but also hit their base for 6. If we ECL out a Poe Dameron here, we are still threatened in the air a little bit, which is a little bit concerning, but we also don't really get any value because, yeah, we kill the L3, but we can't even kill these guys. We discard a card. It doesn't really get that much value. I really do like the Adelphi Patrol Wing here. We get to attack with K2SO for 6, and then we get to ambush one of their cartel turncoats, draw a card. And this is a really nice setup. Now we're not really taking all that much damage. We can flip Han as well this turn, and then we can get in for another 3, and then we have a 4 cause, plus the K2SO, which they kind of have to deal with. Again, L3 right now should be shielded, just as a kind of little addition to kind of what's going on there. It's not like it was exceptionally relevant at the current moment, but, could matter. And we're at 10 damage on our base, so that is, something that we do have to pay attention to. Boba Fett does come down the next turn, so we do have to make sure that we're not getting absolutely wrecked here. But we are in a very good spot, especially with drawing Marauder. I don't think we're going to get to Cassian here. It's not like it's exceptionally relevant, so we'll see. Oh, Chewbacca. Yeah, that one's not a bad one. That one's not a bad one. We get to go deploy Han here. And I'll see what they decide to do. They hit us for 3. And I think I will attack the Chewbacca, because then we can attack the K2 next turn. Claim initiative. Looks like they're going to hit our base, which is reasonable. Definitely reasonable. They're trying to kind of set up potentially lethal next turn. And if they have like a surprise strike, they hit us for 5. But we can... Ooh, Admiral Akbar is kind of interesting. I think I'm going to go ahead and resource this Night Owl Skirmisher. I don't think it's relevant at all. So our options here is we can attack with K2SO, which I think is the most appealing, to kind of kill the Chewbacca, get in for 1 damage, and then deal another 3 to them. We also have Marauder to kill their Cartel Turncoat. We can kill their Cartel Turncoat with our Adelphi Patrol Wing, and then we can deal 3 damage with Han Solo. We need to make sure that we're not actually getting killed this turn, or we just need to set up lethal. And I think what we got here is they could have a surprise strike, and that deals potentially 5 damage here, right? So that we're at 23. But then they would have to deploy Boba and then attack with it, which is a lot of different actions. So I think what we just do is we start off by K2SOing, deal 3 damage, and then we're sitting at a nice 22 here. And then assuming they do have that, like that's kind of what they need to have, then we could be in a little bit of danger. But fortunately for us, they just have a Echo Base Defender, and we can finish the game with a 4 cause. So pretty easy here. And 4 cause is going to wrap the game with a 4 damage, and boom, that is going to wrap us up here. That was a pretty close one. That, decision of whether or not to attack Chewbacca with the Han Solo, I think was definitely worthwhile. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten in that extra damage with K2. And the double K2 ended up working really nicely. The only decision was, instead of Adelphi Patrol Wing, I could have gone with the Poe Dameron. And if I did that, I would have discarded a card to probably make them discard a card, just to give them a couple of different options, since we had so many cards in hand. Marauder would have been good this game for sure. And, the ECL, I think Adelphi Patrol Wing worked a little bit better than Poe Dameron. especially since they ended up playing Chewbacca the following turn. So, I mean, I guess we could have killed their Chewbacca with one hit with Poe Dameron and then dealt a couple damage to their base. But the patrol ring ended up getting in a lot more damage overall, especially since we hit for 6 with K2. And who knows, maybe they would have killed our K2 with L3 if we had gone ECL Poe Dameron. Actually, they wouldn't, because we would have killed it. I don't know. That was an interesting, decision between the Adelphi Patrol Wing, ECL, and Poe Dameron. I think there are merits to both. And if we knew they were going to play Chewbacca afterwards, Poe Dameron might have been a little bit better. Especially since we could have killed L3 and then killed Chewbacca, and Poe Dameron still would have lived. And then we could have gotten damage with Han Solo. So maybe that would have been a little bit more worth it. But on to our next game. Okay, so we are against Palp Red in our second game, and we have a double for a cause, but we don't really have a great turn 1 play. It is just a Fleet Lieutenant, and we don't even have a guaranteed turn 2 play, so I think this is going to be a mulligan. And we mulligan into, well, a pretty reasonable hand, actually. And we have Fleet Lieutenant doesn't really work with anything here. The only thing it works with is Admiral Akbar, so I think that's going to be an easy resource. And because we're resourcing Fleet Lieutenant, I think that Admiral Akbar also is a little bit less interesting. But, I mean, Maz Kanata also isn't that exciting either. I think both these cards, you could resource either one. I think the setup here is turn 1 Sundari Peacekeeper, turn 2 K2, turn 3 Poe Dameron. That's kind of the idea that I'm going with right now. And as such, I don't think there's a real good place for Maz Kanata. So I think that's going to be our resource for this game. Get down the Sundari Peacekeeper, and that gives us a nice 3-powered unit on turn 1. We'll see what our opponent has in terms of, Palp Red. I haven't seen too much Palp Red. I've seen a lot of double green Palp, which has been really nice. And in general, there's just a lot of ramp cards in the decks nowadays. So there's just so many different options that you have when it comes to, getting a lot of value. So here we could go Sundari Peacekeeper, just value, A-Wing, just straight up. I think here we resource the Sundari Peacekeeper, and we get in for 3 damage straight away. I want to make sure we're getting in our damage to start us off. And I think starting off with 3 damage, even though we could have restored an additional 1, is a little bit more valuable. And then we just go in with, well, playing the K2SO. I think that's going to be the most valuable spot. And next turn, we could potentially go Admiral Akbar plus A-Wing, and then ECL out of Poe Dameron. That looks a little bit more appealing here. And it looks like they're not even going to bother attacking. So I like that spot here quite a bit. Go ahead and resource one of these heroic renegades. They're going to kill my K2 for sure. We get to deal 3 damage to them. Then we get to go ahead and deal 3 damage again. So that's kind of nice. And I think in this spot, what do we want here? We don't have anything in the smuggle pile. I think we just get down our Poe Dameron. I know I said I could go A-Wing plus Akbar. But in this spot, that's a pretty weak play because we can't even kill anything on their side of the battlefield with Akbar. So just getting down a Poe Dameron, I think, and maybe discarding a few of these cards is going to be significantly more appealing than anything else. Marauder is a pretty nice one. That can ambush something. I think Cassian can go into the resource pile here. Just playing it as a 3 resource 3/5 is a little bit mediocre. So I like that. Poe Dameron can just discard this heroic renegade, which I think is going to be pretty weak in this stage of the game, and potentially even discard more than that to discard a card from our opponent's hand. I think we just want to go with discard the heroic renegade to deal another 2 to their base, so that we can go ahead and just get a massive chunk of damage on our opponent, and then we can follow up with Marauder, kill their Consortium Star Viper. Potentially, let's go ahead and just attack their base for another 3. They're going to resupply. Let's go ahead and deploy ourselves a Han Solo to see what they go ahead and do here. They claimed initiative. All right, let's go ahead and attack their base here. And then I think we just Marauder. We cannot necessarily get anything from our discard pile to give us ourselves a resource. Yes, resolve the ambush attack, and then we pass. And now we have a couple different cards to play out. They can get down to Palpatine to steal something here, probably the Poe Dameron. So that's going to be pretty good for our opponent, I'll say that much. But they're also not in a great spot, but they definitely get down Emperor Palpatine here, and then we get to see what they decide to do. We definitely get to see what they decide to do. Remember, Cassian can come in as a readied up card, so that's going to be huge. Here, I think we just get in for 3, restore 2. And now they have to kill Marauder. They can't just attack with Poe Dameron into my Han Solo, which is important because Marauder is going to finish out the game, which gives us kind of a couple of different options going forward. Let's go ahead and attack their base. Our Quinton's assault carrier comes down, which is kind of sweet. And then we should just be able to play. They can potentially discard cards, but we should just be able to smuggle out a Cassian, and they have to kill it. But the way they have to do it is attack with Emperor Palpatine, probably sack something in order to kill it, and then we can just take initiative and kill them with whatever they leave behind. Okay, they're going to deal 2 damage to our base. It seems a little bit odd. I think I would have gone with a 2 damage to like a Han Solo or Sundari Peacekeeper, whatever you're not going for. So yeah, the smuggled out Cassian is going to come in something big here. It's going to be pretty big. Don't know if opponents ever play with Poe Dameron here, which makes sense. So we get to go. Oh, can we not play? Oh no, it's not working. Oh man, my card doesn't work. That's quite unfortunate, actually, for us, because this kind of prevents us from really closing out the game, because we would have been able to play that, and then we would have been able to go ahead and attack their base, or they would have had to deal with it. This could potentially work because we get to go Night Owl Skirmisher, and we have a bunch of different kind of threats that just win the game. Of course, ECL Wrecker would have won the game. This works out, but it's unfortunate that the Cassian does not actually go ahead and work from the resource pile. It was working a little bit earlier, so it's not working now, but that is something that could have won us the game. Of course, ECL Wrecker wins us the game basically always. Even if they play like a Reinforcement Walker here, we still win. And they play a Royal Guard, and, well, we just finished the game with an A-Wing. So that's going to be against Palp Red. Pretty sweet. I'm not sure what they are playing red for. Perhaps like Force Throw, Force Lightning, although that's pretty weak. Maybe like Death Star Stormtrooper, maybe Crate Dragon. Who knows? But yeah, pretty sweet. And we ended up getting there with Han Green. Let's go on to our next game. On to our next game. And, well, we got a pretty solid hand here against Vader Green. Now, this is a matchup where you really want to be careful about how you use Han's action. Any leader that can deal damage on their action is a little bit scarier, because if I go, let's say, if I were to go A-Wing here, then they could potentially play like a Death Star Stormtrooper and kill my A-Wing, which would be nightmare scenario, right? But in this spot, we're going to play a Sundari Peacekeeper, and I kind of want to keep the Heroic Sacrifice in hand, but I also, Admiral Akbar could be pretty useful in this game. So I'm actually going to resource the Heroic Sacrifice here. And well, we're going to get down a Sundari Peacekeeper to start us off. And we could kill a Yularian. We could also potentially just attack their base. We will see what we decide to do following our draws on the following turn. Here, it's a good chance I just play the K2SO out and probably resource this Heroic Renegade. Although, I mean, it could be reasonable to play it alongside one of these 3 drops, although these are a little bit more valuable. I think I just go ahead and resource the Heroic Renegade in this spot. They played a Phase 3 Dark Trooper. Okay, well, not really many options here. We just go ahead and trade with it. Phase 3 Dark Trooper, one of the best cards here in set 2, for sure. We're going to go ahead and play out a K2SO. It's a little unfortunate that this is how we have to do it. They can potentially trade with it, with Yularen with it, so that is a little unfortunate. But that's okay. We have a couple of good draws here. The Peacekeeper, I think, is a little bit late because it's only 1 power on defense, and that is pretty important to kind of keep in mind. They could potentially kill K2SO, which would be a little bit unfortunate, and they do. We're going to go ahead and deal 3 damage. And then here, I think we just get down an Adelphi Patrol Wing. We can't attack with it, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it is a 4/4 flyer, which is important, right? 4/4 space unit is always good. They played a Super Laser Tech. We just go ahead and claim initiative, and they can ping my base and their super laser for 1 if they wish, which they decide to do. Here we can get rid of probably just the Admiral Akbar at this point, because we can go K2SO ECL plus a Battlefield Marine, which could be useful. We could also play out a Red 3 plus Battlefield Marine. That could be a little bit more interesting. I kind of like the Battlefield Marine play here. They shouldn't have anything to just kind of kill the Adelphi Patrol Wing. I'm trying to think of what they could have in space at 6 resources. They could have like a Gladiator Star Destroyer, which is pretty bad. They could have a Sentinel, but if that's the case, our Adelphi Patrol Wing still lives. So I think we start us off with a Red 3 to try to get that extra damage in with the Adelphi Patrol Wing. It's also important to realize that Red 3 represents 2 damage because we can also ready up Han Solo and attack with it. So we get to go ahead and deploy, attack for 4, and then get down a Battlefield Marine. So we're going to attack for 4. We're going to play a Battlefield Marine, and then they're probably going to kill Han here, and we're going to claim initiative. So ideal draw here is like a Wrecker or a Podameron. That's kind of what we're really looking for. But we ended up drawing a pretty reasonable card here. We ended up getting K2SO. So we're going to go ahead and attack with Red 3 because that's kind of the most appealing thing for them to kill right out the gate, at least on board. Here, if they want to, they can hit my Patrol Wing and then hit it with Darth Vader. So that is something that they could do, but we're trying to get in as much damage as we possibly can. And we have a lot of burn in our hand right here. So I am looking for that. Ooh, Overwhelming Barrage is kind of brutal. That is pretty bad for us to see. That's a card that we really didn't want to see, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and play a K2SO here. And they can kill it, but we also just get in 3 damage. That's kind of the point of this. They get in 7 damage. We play a For a Cause. We top this and then pass on all the others. So we get a Podameron next turn, which is going to be pretty great. And we can claim initiative, and let's see what they've got to follow it up. Wrecker looks great here. I actually don't even think we resource anything. Podameron lives, which is kind of nice. So we just attack. We can discard maybe a K2SO. We could also Wrecker. Interesting. We can just play Wrecker and then kill their Darth Vader. So we have a few options here. We could ECL out one of these guys. We could ECL out K2SO. That's the weakest, I think. I think we either ECL out one of these guys or just play a Wrecker, and then we can save the ECL Podameron for next turn. And this allows us to defeat one of our resources to kill their Darth Vader, and then they have to have something pretty good. On 9 resources, they can play a lot of things that mess us up. But let's say we go ECL Darth Vader. We keep Wrecker alive, but he's got 1 health on him, and we only realistically do a total of 2 damage to their base. If we ECL out Podameron, we do 2 damage to their base. We have to discard something. I think the highest win percentage here is to play Wrecker, defeat a resource, kill their Vader, and then claim initiative. And this gives us the option to, unless they have something to kill Wrecker, like an Emperor Palpatine, we have a really, really good shot of winning the game. But unfortunately for us, oh wow, we drew like a million Podamerons. That is what they had, and unfortunately, that's pretty bad for us. So we could ECL at Podameron, but I think, again, the highest win percentage is to play a Podameron. They trade with Emperor Palpatine, and then we have an ECL Podameron to follow it up, and looks like they have a Devastator. So even if we ECL'd there, we would have done 2 damage to their base, which would have been just pretty weak. Like, we wouldn't have had any real way to win the game at that point. So it looks like we lost, and there are a couple different decisions there, but they ended up having the 2 kind of win the game kind of cards that they needed to have in order for us to be too far behind. And that's going to be a good game. That was pretty close, I'd say. There is a couple different decisions there, like the Adelphi Patrol Wing, and the kind of turn where we had the Red 3 out and they had the Overwhelming Barrage. Vader Green is really good, and Overwhelming Barrage is the type of card that really needs to kind of win them the game. They also had double Super Laser Tech, which ended up being extremely relevant because the turn that we kind of got all our cards out, they had another Super Laser Tech to deploy Vader on the turn that we were trying to get Han Solo down with Red 3. So ended up working out pretty nice for them, and that Overwhelming Barrage kind of sealed the deal for us. So it looks like we're running it back against another Vader Green. I think it's the same deck. This set's pretty mediocre. I think we could do a little bit better. Like, our turn 1 plays are nothing exceptional, even though we have the Han leader out. So I think we can do just a little bit better. And this hand is, well, quite a bit better. We can get down a 4-1 on turn 1 with a Night Owl Skirmisher potentially, or we can get down a Sundari Peacekeeper on turn 1. I think here the goal will be to probably get the Sundari Peacekeeper down and probably resource the Night Owl Skirmisher alongside the A-Wing. So we can go Red 3 on turn 2, which kind of gives us a couple of cards in a row that we want to play. They have a, well, Death Star Stormtrooper, and we have a Sundari Peacekeeper. So pretty nice. They probably just take initiative so they can kill my Sundari Peacekeeper. I don't think they will action. If they do, then that's pretty heavily advantaged to us because we get to attack with our Sundari Peacekeeper, which is nice. So I'd be pretty happy with that. But as I mentioned, they do not. Let's go ahead and resource one of these Red 3s. They're going to kill my Sundari Peacekeeper. We get to go play Red 3, and we pass. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy going on here. Resupply. Okay, we're going to claim initiative, and at least we kind of have some things going for us now. Poe Dameron, Adelphi Patrol Wing, both pretty strong cards, actually. I think I resourced the Marauder at this point, and I think I just go ahead and play the Adelphi Patrol Wing and then keep the Poe Dameron as a potential ECL option, right? This allows us to hit in for 5, and we have 2 space units, which is something that they kind of have to deal with. And I'd rather keep the Poe Dameron in my hand for potential ECL stuff going on. So they can deal some damage with the... Ooh, they're going to Legal Authority here. Interesting. So they get to steal my unit, which is decent for them. We can go ahead and resource a Cassian here. But as I said, we have the ECL Poe Dameron, which is quite nice. And that's going to allow us to probably discard this Heroic Renegade, get in for 2, kill your units, and do some nice work here. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and, yes, resolve the ambush. We're going to discard this to deal 2 to the command center. And then we don't need to defeat an upgrade because we're going to kill it anyways. And then we don't need to discard anything because I'd rather keep these in hand. And boom, we have Red 3 back, which allows us to kill or attack with a Adelphi Patrol Wing with additional damage. And we can deploy Han to attack. So now our setup's looking pretty good. They also don't have an Overwhelming Barrage target, so they can't Overwhelming Barrage this turn, most likely. Of course, they could play like a Death Star Stormtrooper and then OB. Ooh, Salacious Crumb. All right, yeah, I mean, that is a way to OB something if they want to. They're going to claim initiative. We get to go ahead and deploy and attack their base for 4. And we are looking pretty good here. I think we would go ahead and resource one of these Akbars. For a Cause looks great here. But we have a lot of threats. They kind of need to kill Poe Dameron this turn. They're going to get a Darth Vader. If they don't hit like a Phase 3 Dark Trooper, which is a good chance that they will, then we are sitting very pretty here. Okay, they hit a Phase 3 Dark Trooper. Slightly unfortunate, I will say. As that is obviously quite good for them. Let's go ahead and just attack with the Han Solo. I want to do this so that they activate Crumb. This is exactly what I wanted. The reason I wanted to do it this way is because if they went ahead and just deployed Vader immediately, if I action out a Guerrilla Attack Pod, then I'm not going to be able to attack with it because the Vader would have already been deployed and they're just going to kill it straight up. But now we get to go attack for 7 damage with the attack pod and then kill them with the Adelphi Patrol Wing, and they don't have anything to fight back. So that was kind of the ideal scenario. And we attack with Han because, well, we needed to be able to go ahead and attack their base with the Gorilla Attack Pod. So pretty nice little closeout of the game there. And the key for that one was definitely the Adelphi Patrol Wing on the big hit there. Like, that was pretty awesome. I forgot what we hit him with. It was the was this Sadari Peacekeeper? No, it was the Red 3. We went Red 3 into Adelphi Patrol Wing, and we had the ECL Podameron for their Legal Authority. It's one of the reasons why I think Legal Authority and like these types of cards are very weak, is against like ECL or these things, like your unit was already going to die, and now you have essentially just wasted a card, right? Because yeah, they took my Red 3, and yes, I couldn't have attacked with it, but it didn't really do a whole lot, which is why I'm not super high on those types of cards. They're good in certain scenarios, but yeah, the Phase 3 Dark Troopers are really good, and it almost kind of saved them, but we were able to get there, close out the game. We did have 4 Cause in hand, so we were sitting quite pretty, and we even had like Cassian in our Smuggle pile and a Night Owl Skirmisher. Although at this point in the game, if that's what you're relying on, you probably are losing. So space units, really, really nice, and getting like an Adelphi Patrol Wing and making sure we had the damage to kind of close out the game is really relevant. So lost the first one, won the second one. Let's go on to the next game. On to game number, what is this, 5? Game 5? I gotta check, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, this is game number 5, and we're against double yellow Boba. This hand's pretty weak, right? Like, we have a 4-1 here if we wanted to play that. Cassian, I guess it's not like super weak. I'm changing my mind. We can go 4-1 on turn 1, right? Because we play this out. And then we can smuggle the Cassian out later, and we probably just resource like an Admiral Akbar, because I want to keep both Podamerons in hand. Because we can go turn 1 Skirmisher, turn 2 K2SO, turn 3 Dameron, and then turn 4 Dameron with the ECL. So I think I like that kind of potential. So I go ahead and resource these two, and we can get down a Night Owl Skirmisher on turn 1. Chances are they just kill it or trade with it. Not a big deal. But we will go ahead and get down a 4-power unit on turn 1. So anything we would have played there would have died to a Greedo. So nothing else that we can really do. Heroic Renegade can go ahead and go into our resource pile. A-Wing has a better chance of getting in some damage at this point in the game. They probably just kill. Yep. And then we go ahead and play a K2SO. But what's nice about this is we're going to have initiative now. So they made the trade, which is very good for us. Heroic Resolve looks really nice here. I'm going to go and resource the A-Wing because 4 Cause is going to get that direct damage. But because they are forced to make that trade, they now kind of are in a situation where we are making our plays and they have to react to them because of our initiative. So that's really nice. And now we have a Podameron on the battlefield and a K2SO, which are both extremely, extremely threatening cards to have on the battlefield. And look, they just claim initiative. Like, that is a very weak play. We can go on a resource in R2, and who knows, maybe they have a Cunning here. Looks like they have a Cantina Bouncer, which is totally fine because we're going to go ahead and attack their base for 4. And then we can ECL to Podameron and kill their Boba Fett. Right, so that's going to be pretty huge. And if they don't do anything, we just play Podameron off of Han, Heroic Resolve Han. Or if they do this, we just Podameron. We use the ambush attack. We kill, we discard probably the Battlefield Marine to deal 2 damage. And we pass. Don't need to discard a card, and boom. Now their Boba Fett's dead, and we are in a very good spot. So we just attack their base for 3, and then we pass. Maz Kanata looking pretty weak here. I think that we can go ahead and safely resource that. And they have to have something pretty good. I mean, obviously, Cunning is always good. So if they have a Cunning here, then that could be a little bit scary. Yep, they do have a Cunning, so they probably exhaust +4/+0. Let's see if that's what they decide to do. Exhaust, and they +4/+0. Makes sense. Let's go ahead and attack with Han. So that's 10 damage to our base, so that's a lot. Let's go ahead and for a cause here. Top. We get to go ahead and heroic sacrifice something. So let's claim initiative and hope they don't have anything else, right? A new adventure. Wow, they had a new adventure too. That's really good. That's really good for sure. That's definitely very scary. But we have K2SO, we have Heroic Resolve. I think we resource the Podameron at this point. We could kill their Cantina Bouncer. But if they have a cunning, they deal 7, 10. They'd kill us if they have a cunning, but I don't know if we can beat that, right? Let's say the cunning, they hit us for 7. That's 4. We can't do anything about the 7th fleet, so they just take initiative and win. So we cannot win if they have a cunning. We must just play as if they don't have cunning. So we're going to go to Heroic Resolve, hit their base for 6, deal 3 damage, and then we can 4 cost. I suppose, like, this is just a way to win the game, assuming they don't randomly make us discard or anything like that. But Heroic Sacrifice is really good in this spot. And yeah, our opponent, the New Adventure plus the Cantina Bouncer, was really close, but we ended up closing out the game. The Heroic Sacrifice, really important there. If that was a desperate attack, that would have only done, 4 damage or 6 damage, right? So we wouldn't have gotten the extra 3 on there. So that would have been potentially relevant. So Heroic Sacrifice does have its advantages in a spot like that where you're like at the last turn. Desperate attack is more for like the middle stage of the game, just trying to get in some more damage. So, no, there you go. There's an advantage for Heroic Sacrifice, and let's go on to the next game. All right, so we're moving on to probably the last game that we have today, and we're against, well, Palp Double Green. This hand's pretty weak. It's not exceptionally weak, but it is reasonably weak because we go Sundari Peacekeeper into A-Wing plus Battlefield Marine. I guess that's okay. I think that's a reasonable hand. And then we resource Akbar plus Cassian to set up. And then for a cause is going to be a nice little later gameplay. And then we can go Sundari Peacekeeper on turn 1. They have a Yularen, which obviously can heal them up, which is pretty good. And then we can play a 3-1 Battlefield Marine and a 1-3 A-Wing. I think I'd rather have the higher HP A-Wing because they can sacrifice something to deal 1 damage to something. And I think I'd rather them have that option on the Battlefield Marine since A-Wing has a very higher likelihood of getting in more damage, usually. But this is a reasonable hand. We also have the Cassian to bring back a little bit later on. So let's pass to see what we draw. We drew the Akbar. I think we just go ahead and resource that, keep both 4 causes in hand. That's going to give us a lot of reach later on. We do want to start drawing some more expensive stuff like an Adelphi Patrol Wing or like Poe Dameron next turn would be amazing. Heck, even a K2SO would be great. Wrecker, always love to see Wrecker in my hand. Card's great. Akbar, I think, can go away. Let's see what we've got. They're just going to attack my Sundari Peacekeeper. Okay, we're just going to get in for 3 on their base then. If they want to defeat it, that's fine. They get to draw a card, but this kind of sets us up for a nice little option for us. They take initiative. Okay, that is quite nice for us. Okay, Owl Skirmisher and a Wrecker. I think I just go with the 4 of cause here. It's not a particularly strong play, but I really, really want to keep Wrecker on the battlefield or in my hand. That's like extremely important. We have a 4 of cause. We hit him for 4. Poe Dameron looks good. K2 looks good, and Heroic Sacrifice looks good. Honestly, all of those are pretty nice. Actually, hold on. I meant to put the Poe Dameron, K2SO, Heroic Sacrifice. That's how I wanted it to do it. I wanted to make sure I drew the Heroic Sacrifice this turn, because there's a good chance that I will want to do that this turn. Let's go ahead and resource. I can ECL out Poe Dameron next turn if I would like. I was thinking I was going to play Wrecker this turn. So maybe the Heroic Sacrifice is actually not that great. I was thinking I was going to play Wrecker, defeat a resource, and then I could ECL out Poe Dameron next turn. I think that is probably going to be the play. Get in for 3. And then we can also deploy Han, so get in for another 3. And no matter what they play here, there's a good chance that we will kill whatever they play with Wrecker. If not, we can always just kill. That's strange. All right, they pass. So I'm going to go and deploy Han. Now, this does change a few things, right? Okay, then an Overwhelming Barrage, kill Han, I'm assuming. That's fine. We will just play a K2SO. So I can't play Wrecker anymore, but this sets us up for an ECL'd Wrecker a little bit later on, potentially. We have a lot of direct damage in our hand, so I'm not really that afraid right now. Like, yeah, we deal 3 damage. They trade their mercenary company, but now we hit with A-Wing. Now they're at 22 damage, which is extremely nice. And we could even ECL out a Wrecker here to just straight up deal 6 to them. So that's what I'm going to do. We Wrecker. We do not need to deal... we do not need to defeat a resource, and that's just straight up 6 damage. So the reason I did it this way is if they're passing, then they obviously have a reactive card like Overwhelming Barrage, right? And the way they played that was, okay, they are setting up kind of something to do and trying to go ahead and make it so that they can actually remove my Han or whatever I play. They knew I had Wrecker and they knew I had Podameron and K2SO. But the way this works is now it allows me to ECL out Wrecker, potentially, and just kill whatever they have and get in some damage. And we have a 4 cause in hand, so we just win the game. Like, straight up that easy, right? When we have this much direct damage, it doesn't really matter what they do. We just kind of make sure we can get in our damage as much as we can and then have 4 cause finish out the game, and that's exactly what happened. So that was a pretty nice end to the game. We didn't actually get Cassian out in terms of the resource pile, but that's more towards control decks where it's really, really good. It may be worth just not playing Cassian in the main deck, but I'll wait on that. And let's talk about the deck and talk about a few things that I might have changed, like potentially Cassian. All right, so a few things about the deck, guys. First up, Han, really powerful, really aggressive, and can do some major things to get in some damage. A few things that I really liked. I think that the kind of 1-drop / 2-drop package ends up working really well. If you're going to play Red 3, I would like to play these lower costed cards. Otherwise, Red 3 ends up being a little bit on the weaker side of things. And I think having like the potential to go Maz Kanata plus R2 plus Marine or something like that is really valuable, right? Or, you know, Maz Kanata R2, something like that, plus Heroic Resolve, or like Battlefield Marine plus Maz Kanata. I think that's pretty powerful. I also really like the array of 2-drops that we do have. I think that you could potentially replace Marine for another space unit. That could be pretty valuable. And, you know, that ends up getting potentially a little bit more damage in. Sundari Peacekeeper is one of the best turn 1 plays. You know, it gives us that restore, really works well against aggro decks. Night Owl Skirmisher, also pretty good on turn 1 as a 4-powered unit. Same with Heroic Renegade. You can go Maz Kanata plus Heroic Renegade, which is pretty nice. We didn't see this too much. It was a little bit bugged as far as I've found. It didn't actually end up giving us the +2 power, which is a little bit weak. Overall, when you start getting to the middle stages of the game, this is where the deck really shines. Yes, turn 1 is cool. Turn 2 is where the deck's like, oh, that's why you play Han. Turn 2 K2SOs. Into turn 3 Patrol Wings, turn 3 Podamorons, turn 4 Attack Pods, Wreckers. The things that I would change, I would probably take out the black 1. And honestly, I would probably take out the Attack Pods and just go all in on the Adelphi Patrol Wings and the Wreckers. Those cards are just exceptionally powerful, and I've found that they are just the keys to kind of winning the game. I did like the Admiral Akbar in certain spots, and I did like the Desperate Attacks, but honestly, I would probably take out, you know, some of the other cards like Cassian Andor. Yes, ended up going in the resource pile a lot, and there are some situations where Smuggle is really good and can help us win out the game. But I think in most scenarios, I would have rather just had the Desperate Attacks plus the Heroic Sacrifices, which ended up being really good with the K2SOs, as we've already seen. The reason I like those more expensive cards is the ability to play like K2SO on turn 2, and then followed up with like an Adelphi Patrol Wing, and then you have ECL. Like, your opponent has to deal with all these expensive threats, and then you can ECL something big afterwards, which ends up being like Podameron or Wrecker. Those are the 2 cards that you really want to ECL out and finish out the game. Like that last game, let's say that Wrecker was like the previous set 1, like that was like a Zeb, for example, which is what we were ECLing out before. There's no way we would have won that game, or at least a good chance that we would have lost, because Wrecker deals the damage, you know, and that's really important. It's like the Steadfast Battalion, right? I guess if we had Steadfast Battalion there, it also wouldn't have worked out because they overwhelming barraged my Han, right? So that's one of the reasons why Wrecker ends up being so powerful, because it guarantees that damage where you don't need your leader out. And that's what's so powerful about Steadfast Battalion previously, was that it dealt 7 damage, or most likely like 3 to 4 damage to your base, or to the enemy's base, and kept that thing around. Wrecker does the same thing, but it kind of guarantees like 6 damage, because you can make it so that you deal 5 damage to something and then overwhelm through it, and then it makes it really powerful. But the key cards, guys: Wrecker, Podameron, For a Cause, K2SO. Those 4 are kind of the keys. Honestly, you could even swap out some of the other cards for like Daring Raid, Chaos of War, more direct damage / burn, and that could also work out pretty well. I played on with a double red Han list with like Fighters for Freedom. That also works exceptionally well. And honestly, I found that to be more powerful in some scenarios, and I found this to be more powerful in some scenarios. When you're against the more aggro decks, Sundari Peacekeeper really does help out, and so does Marauder and Adelphi Patrol Wing. But against, you know, more mid-range control decks, well, the double red comes in really handy. So there's a lot of different ways to build Han, and that's kind of the reason why these set 2 videos are out. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I will see you all for a video very soon.